Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Mik with us. Mik, do you just want to quickly introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself?
Yes, hello. Right, I'm Mik Scarlet, and I'm as old as Methuselah. I'm one of the elder statespeople of the disabled community. I'm old. I've been around forever. I was a musician, then I was a TV presenter, then I worked in the media a bit more, then I was a journalist, then I was a commentator, then I was a access consultant, then I was an equality trainer, and now I am the co-CEO of a charity called Phab, and I'm starting up a new kind of access consult. It's called a concierge access consultancy. So it's a bit push, but basically that's what I'm doing now. So yeah, and I'm disabled. I am a wheelchair user. I was born with cancer, so I've been disabled from before I popped out, but diagnosed at 6 weeks old. And I used to walk with a limp, and then my back crapped out when I was 15. So now I am, that became a full-time wheelchair user when I had my first spinal cord injury. And since then I've had 2 more. So I'm now on number 3. And I'm collecting them. My plan is eventually to see if I can get in the Guinness Book of Records as the man who's had the most spinal cord injuries. I don't know if there is one of those entries. I may already be suitable to go in it, but yeah. So I'm just recovering. At the moment, I'm just recovering from my 3rd one, which is why anyone that remembers me being quite out on the scene a lot may think, well, where's Mik? I haven't died. I'm just recovering from surgery and getting used to new levels of medication, which we were discussing before we came live, but I won't tell you all about them because it's basically... Anyway, that's me.
Awesome. I mean, there's so much I want to dive into with you because as you've just explained, you've done a hell of a lot of stuff and a long amount of time, but not really in the grand context of how much you got done. So can you run us through sort of the story of what's got you here today in terms of like where you started out to what you're doing now?
Yeah, okay. So, and I'll try to keep it short because I do waffle, as you can tell. My story has been one of luck and seeing the luck and going for it. So as far back as like when I was 5, my mum and dad wanted me to go to a mainstream school. So they moved across my hometown of Luton, and to get me to go to the one school in the whole town that would give me a chance. The luck was that was the year, 1970 was the year when it finally became legal to go to a mainstream school if you were disabled. Wow. Before that, you had to go to special schools. So I went to school, and I was the only disabled kid in every school I ever went to, pretty much. But it taught me that actually being disabled isn't as dramatically different as you think. In fact, if anything, it taught me that I'm probably stronger than most of my non-disabled friends who are very weedy and always ill and moaning about stuff that you're like, is that it? So that was sort of the thing. And I was brought up by parents who kind of made me feel that I was sort of indestructible. That's where the stage name Scarlet comes from Captain Scarlet. You have no idea what I'm talking about. But Jerry Anderson, when I was a kid, was just king, and all of his programs were great. And my childhood hero was Captain Scarlet, who was indestructible. He could be crushed and killed and burnt and blown up, and he'd come back together. And that's what I felt like. So that was great. Went to school, finished, spine collapsed at 16 as a side effect of the cancer treatment I had. I should note that I am one of the oldest people to have survived the cancer I've ever had. There's about 5 more older than me, and we meet every now and on Facebook and go, getting old is really rubbish, isn't it? This bit dropped off the other day, which is great. But so my spine collapsed and I became a wheelchair user. And so I have a really weird relationship with disability because I was born disabled, but I became disabled as well. So I suddenly dramatically got, my impairment got a lot worse, and I had to learn to rebuild my life. So while I was at home, a slightly overweight, filled with steroids type ill person, because back then what they did whenever your spine collapsed, they gave you loads of steroids to make you heal quicker. So I went from being this tiny little thin sort of gothic new romantic with cheekbones to this massive meathead with And trust me, it's never left. So I've got a 50-inch chest and it's just rubbish. It's ridiculous.
Having met Mick in real life, I can attest that. Yeah, he's a solid dude in more senses of the word.
It's most annoying because people see wheelchairs and they all think we're the same size. Yeah. And then I wheel into a room and everyone kind of goes, oh. And I looked at, do you remember when I was young, we had Action Men and all these different characters, like Star Wars figures and all and there was always one figure, in my case it was Steve Austin, the $6 Million Man, that was about that much taller than everyone else. And I'm kind of that person because I'm massive, 6'3", built like a barn door. So
I used to always get called Johnny Bravo, was my one. Johnny Bravo.
Ironically, when that was out with the blonde hair and the sunglasses, my wife used to go, if you could stand up, because it is a bit. But anyway, so I was stuck at home, and I it's something that I learnt from that period was that all your friends go when you change your impairment. Your friends go, and it is it's quite a shock, and it goes the same for if you're ill. So I think it's if something happens with your impairment or with your life, just you get ill, everyone goes. So I had no mates. I was all on my own, and I thought, I know, I got a little bit of a bonus where I'd been refused what was then called mobility allowance and attendance allowance as a kid, because apparently I was not disabled enough. But then they went, oh, well, actually, we should have given you it from the age of 12. So I suddenly had a large check. So I spent it all on keyboards. So I bought myself a really shit synthesizers and a drum machine that went, and that was it, and learnt to play keyboards. My mum and dad bought me an organ, a Botempi organ. I asked for a synthesizer, and because my mum and dad didn't understand what I wanted, they bought me this also a chord thing. But it meant I had a keyboard I could play chords on, and then 2 monosynths, and I just taught myself to play. And I used to chat girls up by inviting them round to my house and then playing the Human League's Dare from start to finish. Seconds of your life. So I used to do the whole thing. I got a couple of jobs when I was well enough, but it just, back then, no law, no Equality Act, you could get sacked. So I got sacked quite a lot. Whenever I was ill, they went, oh, we thought you'd be ill because disabled people are always sick. So I'd get fired. And I thought, oh, bollocks this, I'm just going to do music. So I did what everyone did in the 80s. I signed on and pursued my dream of being a musician. And that happened. I managed to, the band I was in got average big, sort of not signed up, but kind of big on the gigging circuit. Mm-hmm. I wrote loads of theme tunes and adverts and jingles and film scores and all stuff like this, which is great. And one day doing a gig in a pub in Luton, in fact, it was a club called the Tropicana Beach. Never forget it. My computer blew up on stage. So I fixed it. And basically it was like a big black box, it was a bit like a video recorder, not that you know what, like a CD, like a DVD, like a, what's the new one?
I know what you mean. I'm not that.
I don't know.
New age.
When you get to my age, it's like, everybody, I remember the first mobile phones the size of a small, brick. Yep. Hello. Anyway, so I fixed it on stage, and because Luton's not the place to be on stage fixing a computer in a casual club when you look like a cross between Billy Idol and Mad Max and, kind of, I don't know, and Johnny Bravo and sort of whatever. So I was like, oh my God. So I was joking and mucking about. And afterwards, a bloke came up to me and said, hello, I'm a producer from Thames TV. And I was really impressed with how you handled that. Would you like to come and do a screen test for telly? And I thought, well, at the time, basically everyone on telly was getting a record deal, Kylie, and they were all getting, and I thought, yeah, cool, no troubles. Yeah, this will be how I get my record deal. So I did the audition, got the job, and the first show I did was with Toyah Willcox, which for my generation is just like, well, I can honestly say that we all had the Toyah picture from Looking on our walls, where she showed one of her glorious boobs, and we were like, wow, Toyah. So it was a bit weird to mix, and that just snowballed. So that lucky moment got me into telly. And then every time I saw, because people now go, oh, there wasn't any disability on telly when I was young. And it's like, Well, there was. There was telly on when I was young. Disabled people were on. You know, Nabil Shaban played Syl in Doctor Who. You know, this is old. You know, and it started to become this thing where more mainstream. There was lots of disability interest shows even then, but it was starting to become really quite mainstream interest. And I'd see these programs and they'd go, next week, we're talking about disability. And I'd ring up and go, is it someone disabled presenting it? And they'd go, oh, no, we hadn't thought of that. And I go, well, I'm available at very reasonable rates. So I'd get all these gigs and I started working for Channel 4's Youth, YOOF, Youth department that was run by Janet Street Porter. So I did a show called The Survivor's Guide and then went to do a show called Sex Talk where I did one of the early documentaries about disability and sexuality, which is available online on my Facebook page, where you can watch 45 minutes of really old-fashioned, like really cut slow, and oh god, you know, television back then was very different. No fast cutting, no Avid editing or anything. It was basically done with tape. You had video recorders, and you played them all in, and you played 3 video recorders into one video recorder with. And you'd go along a bit and it add a bit to the tape as you went. So you can imagine how slow that was. Then that led to Channel 4 asking me to do a show called Beat That, which was a kids show. And I'd just done a show about a girl putting a dildo on a stick because she had thalidomide and wanted to be able to wank. And then
they said,
what we think of, would you like to do a kids show? And I was like, are you sure? And so I did Beat That, and it just caught the public's imagination. It was really weird. It was a little show where 8 or 10 kids would be put together, and there'd be half disabled and half non-disabled. And the point was they'd never met before. Like, the disabled kids might know each other because they came from the same special school, but otherwise it was quite weird. And then they'd have to do a task, run a restaurant, go to France and buy some stuff, put on a fashion show, weird things that kids would never really get to do normally. And I was hired to be a presenter / their really annoying older brother, which I played very well. And then also to make it so the disabled kids felt like it was their show. Because if you're a disabled kid and you're turning up to do telly, if it's presented by you, by one of your gang, you feel like you own it more. So basically I did, and that just went bonkers. So when that was going out, I was getting the same viewing figures as Jonathan Ross on Don't Forget Your Toothbrush on the same channel. And it was sold all around the world. And it's really bizarre. Like, it was only about 10 years ago. I was at an art event and I saw Jenny Seeley from Grey Eye. So I went over to say hello. And there was a woman there, visually impaired from Canada, who went, hey, you're Mik Scarlet. And I was like, okay, yeah. And she went, I'd know that voice anywhere. You're massive in Canada, even today. And it's like, that's really weird because I'm not fucking massive here. But this, I think, is because then from there I went on to do a disability news magazine show called From the Edge. And that went out for 11 years. It just went on forever.
Wow.
So we were doing 30 episodes a year. So it's about 15, 16 hours of television over the year. And then we were doing documentaries, hour-long documentaries, and then also advising all of the BBC on how to do better portrayal with a thing called the Disability Programs Unit, which was part of the Community Programs Unit. And we were we had a big floor in White City. Now it's just fallen a bit, and it's owned by ITV, I think, like most of the BBC now. But it was this massive department, and there was made Black Britain. There was a couple of so it was like the ethnic TV department where all the programs were made for like the ethnic minorities. We've got the gay department, and then the disabled, all in the same, and we were all kind of mixing together and having lots of fun. And then so did that. But what was weird at that time, there was also Julie Fernandez, Andrew Miller was doing TV as well. Loads of us were on, but we were all kept apart quite a lot. And we were also all really ripped off for how much we should have been paid. And as we grew in fame, we also kind of got to know each other more and talked. And we found out that, you know, we were being ripped off, and we talked to non-disabled presenters and found out they were getting paid a lot more. I'll never forget, I did a thing for Channel 4 Schools, and the producer was the presenter from a show called Magpie that I watched when I was little. And I went in and did the thing, audition, and he went, yeah, great, you love it, brilliant, super. And then he said, how much do you want? And I went, 1,500? And I meant for the shoot. And he went, a day? Brilliant. And I was like, shit, that's a fucking load of money. And then I went, shit, he said yes too quickly, which means that 1,500 isn't a lot of money, which means, one, I could have got more from him, but two, I've been royally fucked over for all the other stuff I've done where, you know, people are going, 150, 250, maybe 300 if you're lucky. And then suddenly you find out that this is, you know, when you talk to someone that works as a presenter, he thinks that 1,500 a day is good money. So, and Julie was was acting in Dangerfield, and she found out what all the other actors were on, went to the producer and the director to say, can I have some more? And they said, well, you're lucky to be working at all because we don't need to employ disabled people. And so that kind of really hurt. And I mean, she gave up doing telly after a while just because it was so depressing. Every job you go for is like you've never done it before. There's no career development. And that, I think, is the big difference. It's not that there wasn't anyone on telly. It's just that they never got famous. Like now, you can be on The Last Leg. You can be Sophie or Shani or one. You know, they get that.
The reason why I sighed was because I brought it up on the podcast before. Why is Josh Widdicombe on that show? He doesn't need to be. He's not even that funny.
You see, the thing is, what you got to remember, because what is it now? 29 shows, so it's been on since before the Paralympics, and he was there to be the token non-disabled person.
Yeah,
because they thought, because I can imagine the room. Yeah, we've got to have a disabled show, right? And it's got to be funny. So we'll get Adam Hills, because he's really funny, right? And then we'll get Alex, because Alex applied to be a presenter about sport. He knows about sport. It's going to be Paralympics. He'd be good, yeah. But we need to have a non-disabled person on, because otherwise it will just be lots of cripples and no one will want to watch that. So they got Josh on. But now what's happened, of course, is that the public has become more used to seeing and discussing and having that sort of sense of irreverent humour about disability. And like you said, now Josh Widdicombe just seems like he shouldn't be there. He's sort of making jokes at the expense of other people, and they're all going, ha, 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 ha. And you always kind of think at any moment Alex Brooker could turn around and go, you piss off, Ginger, whack. Do you know what I mean? And it's sort of, do you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't get it. But I also think that one of the things is that there are lots and lots of people in the industry who are actually disabled, who don't admit to it. Because, you know, as we've expanded our mind, and it's not wheelchairs, you know, hearing impaired, visually impaired, or, you know, it's we've grown, and our community has got bigger and more understanding of the fact that you don't have to look disabled to be disabled. I think I very recently have been diagnosed with ADHD, and a few years before that was diagnosed with a type of dyslexia called Erland syndrome. I've lived my whole life not knowing this, just getting on with it, being the wheelchair guy. And now suddenly I'm like, but I've got more than one of these joyous, fun impairments. Yeah. Because it never really impacted on my life. So who knows? I always look at Josh Widdicombe and just kind of go, I reckon there's something going on there. He needs a couple of,
I mean, I can see what you mean. I think
he needs a couple of disability equality sessions, and he'll be one of the secret gang. The non-visible impairment gang.
I mean, I say Josh Widdicombe, I think it also doesn't help that personally I don't find him funny, so that I'm also even more inclined to be like, why are you there? The other two are hilarious. You're useless.
What you mean is you can think of some, you know, equally auburn-haired sex bomb in a chair who could possibly do that job much better. I think that's what you mean. I know that feeling well, sir. This is one of my, it's funny because I love seeing the new young disabled people on telly, you know, and at the same time, I'm like, I'm so much better than them. I was really great. I'm a natural. It just comes out. I mean, I love chatting. I'm good at getting stories out of people, and I'm like, I'd have been better on that. you know. And I applied to be an expert on DIY SOS because I wrote to them and said, look, you can't keep doing it for us. We need to be there. We need to say, you know, instead of like you watch it and they're putting gravel down and it's like, no, don't put bloody gravel down. Gravel's bollocks. Right? Oh, it's compacted. It doesn't make any difference unless you glued it together. It's still in gravel, right? And so I wrote to them about it, and I did a screen test and everything. But I know that what happened was they were like, "Will you be able to get in the route? And it'll be dangerous."
Health and safety got in the way.
Yeah, and it's like that's what I do anyway. I go to building sites. You know, I was working on HS2 before they cancelled it. Damn. You know, going with a hard hat and a big high vis thing, going do this, do that, and I think that. But it's weird the way that hasn't changed. You still have those shows where people talk about us in the third person as opposed to us talking about us. Yeah. And, you know, you've got The Last Leg and you've got sort of, you know, I mean, one of the things I love is the fact you've got shows like Steve Brown on Escape to the Country. Yeah. He just levitates into these country piles and then levitates out again. And no one ever mentions the fact that he can't get into most of them. Here I am in this old building and it's lovely and old. And you're like, how the hell did you get up those steps? And I love the way he always goes, well, I'll leave you to have a look upstairs. And it's like, of course you bloody will, mate. But what's funny is there's never a show where he's doing it and someone else is disabled as well. If they ever have someone with mobility issues on, he doesn't present it. Like one of the other presenters do. And you're like, but surely he's the guy. Like, if you're going to say, oh, I can't walk very far, I've got, like, they had someone on the other day on one of them that's talking about having an ME. And I was like, well, Steve would have been perfect for this because there's this camaraderie. Oh, yeah, I know that problem. Do you know what I mean? And don't do it. And the other thing that's really funny, because, you know, they had this thing recently saying the BBC has dropped the amount of representation that it's done from 8% to 5% or something. Well, I don't know if anyone, hey viewers, do you know? But anyone at all that appears on screen that's disabled, they try to count against the number of people. So I've done a couple of things where I've been interviewed like about something. It's called contributor in the industry. And they've written to me afterwards and said, could you add your name to our list of disabled people on telly? And I've written back and gone, no, piss off. I was being interviewed about something. That's not the same as being the interviewer, being the actor. There's no point having an extra that wheels past every now and again. You've got to have a main character who's disabled. I can't wait to see Kitty. Is it Castlemaine in EastEnders? Because ironically, her mum, Lucy Alexander, who used to do Homes Under the Hammer, started her career alongside a certain Mik Scarlet when we were both presenters on Nickelodeon. Because when Nickelodeon started, we were like, this is like 93. We were the presenters. So I was the weird punk goth and she was the kind of day-glow, baggy, hippie girl. And we used to do the live continuity between the cartoons.
Love it.
So, that was an interesting period in my life, doing 8 hours straight live telly.
Ouch.
Great. Good fun.
So,
so I don't know what we were talking about there and how we got to that.
Right.
But that's,
we've
you've
covered
your... Not me, I don't care.
It's all right. We got to sort of like your performance career. So how did you get more into the consulting and the new venture that you're setting up now?
Yeah, right. Well, I, as with all TV presenters, basically in, where was it? 1999, I had a car accident. And this was when I broke my back for the second time. And it took a while to find out because one of the ways they find out you've broken your back is that your legs stop working. If your legs aren't working already, they're kind of a bit shit at noticing it. So I got quite ill before they found out. So I I gave up telly and I had to be rebuilt. So that was when they took all of my spine out and replaced it with titanium rods, bits of smashed up spine and titanium rings. So I'm actually worth more dead as scrap than I will ever be alive. I always said to my wife, if I die, make sure when you get the ashes, shake them because if they don't rattle, you haven't got the bits that you can sell on the scrap metal market. But so when I came back, it was probably about 2 or 3 years. The industry had quite massively changed because in that time, social media had started to take off. The internet was really big, and I didn't really have an online presence. All of my videos were on VHS. So people, it was like starting all over again. And by that time, there was new people like Addy Adepitan coming up, and I'd put on loads of weight because when you're not well and you're stuck in bed for I was laid flat for 6 months. You eat. So I had to try and. So basically, I gave up. I kind of thought, well, I didn't give up. It gave me up. So I was really lucky. I was part of all through my career. I've been advising places on accessibility. One of the first places I ever worked on was the Ministry of Sound in London, where I used to go there all the while clubbing, and I went to the management and said, it's a really accessible club, but there's some things you've got wrong. So they hired me, and I basically advised them how to make the loos better. And then we created a light-free zone because one of my best mates had light-sensitive epilepsy, and she loved raving, but could very rarely go raving because the lights meant that she'd not be good. So, and there were little things like that. I trained the team to understand that disabled people want to have fun just like everybody else, and we're not going to cause trouble, and we're not difficult. And so I'd done a bit, and I joined what was called then the London Access Forum. That was basically like a panel of disabled people that worked with the new GLA. Yes, because GLC then had GLA. And Ken Livingstone was the mayor then. And he sort of said, well, it's really unfair because you lot are working for free, and there are professionals in the industry who aren't disabled that are making a butt ton of money telling people what to do instead of disabled people telling people what to do. So he arranged a training course with the newly formed Inclusion London, and I was one of the 8 people that went on it. So I did it, and while I was taking it, like everyone else was kind of going, I don't want to do it professionally. It'll affect my, my life, my income, and all that, my benefits and stuff. And I just could see that this was a great way of making a really easy living. And then when I found out how much they pay you, I realized that I was going to make more in 1 week than I'd made in a whole week in television. And I thought, right, that's it for me. So I started being an access consultant. And again, it was one luck that I'd got this reputation for being good in nightclubs and gigs. So I did a lot of work with new clubs, and, like I helped Coco when it first opened and all stuff like that. But also about the same time, I was helping with just after that, I was helping with the build up to the Paralympics. When we got the Olympics and the Paralympics, I started working with LOCOG as one of their access consultants and sort of help training the staff and what have you. And I met a wonderful woman who's their kind of senior disability expert, Margaret Hickish, who sadly is no longer with us, but she was great. And she was like this force of nature. You'd go into a room, she was Scottish, and she'd basically just, in a much politer way, call everyone a bunch of C words and tell them to get it right. And she would not take it. She wouldn't no one got away with anything. And so we worked together for a bit, and then she went to work at Network Rail and said, Mick, would you like to come with me to train up our staff? Because I'm a TV presenter, I've got the jazz hands. So I went over to work with her as a freelancer and was doing the staff training for all of Network Rail's customer-facing staff. So that's a lot of people.
I think you need
and
to
that's how I got into the training stuff. So, and then I realized that training is basically like being an actor and a TV presenter. You learn your lines. You've got a really small audience that you've got to keep engaged. And you do, and you have to, and you're trying to teach them stuff in a fun way, which is basically what kids' TV is. Do you know what I mean? You're kind of, kids, but let's learn something new and have fun. Yay. So kind of really, I was the perfect person for it. So I did that. And then she sent me on some courses to train up to be a trainer. Then the government discovered that they had completely and utterly missed out a section of the Equality Act that said that all of the public sector had an extra duty called the Public Sector Equality Duty to do more than just businesses about equality. And so then Network Rail were given the task of inventing how this is done. And I was part of the team of 10 that worked on it. And so then I became one of the leading experts on that, which was great. So I was doing all that and doing all access and diddly-dee. And it was all freelance, and I'm quite lazy. So I was earning just enough to be happy. I wasn't, I wasn't going to retire and all this kind of stuff. And then in 2019, a weird year, my mum was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I was driving up to see her and had another car accident, and that broke my back again.
God.
So, but again, no one spotted it. Then my mum died, and it felt really weird because obviously as a kid that had cancer, I've spent my whole life thinking I'll die young. And suddenly I realized you aren't going to die young because you're not bloody young anymore. You're old. And then I thought, well, in that case, I don't want to be doing piecemeal bits. I want to leave a proper legacy. I used to think, you see, that I didn't need to worry about legacy because people would remember me for being Mik Scarlet superstar. But now I know that they won't. So I've got to do something. Diane always laughs and said, it's like Bender in Futurama when they would go to the Egyptian planet and he builds this giant statue. Remember me. It's like, I kind of have this weird, I can't have kids because obviously having cancer as a baby, I am the ultimate in Jaffa. So, there's I'm not going to pass on my genes and think, well, one day my great grandchildren will talk about great, Granddad Mick on some weird genealogy program. And I know that, I was thinking maybe I'd get buried when I die so that in Time Team 30, 20 something, robot Tony Robinson will dig me up and go, look at the savagery that the medical profession did to this poor man, because my skeleton on the inside just looks like the biggest nightmare you've ever seen. I am more held together by luck and magic than by bones and biology. So, but then I thought, no, that's rubbish. Use your skills to do something positive. So I started working with Buckinghamshire Disability Services, or BUDS. We designed a kind of package that's like an online guide to how to be an inclusive business in the hospitality, retail and entertainment sector. That's online, you can sign up for and you get that. And that was I thought that's quite good. And then I'd been when I was 16 and I lost all my friends and it was all weird. And I was sort of like quite depressed. My social worker said, why don't you go to a Phab club? And I was like, what? And back then, it didn't just mean Phab, like Phab, Phab, like, wow. It stood for something. Just think about it, folks. Back then, it stood for Physically Handicapped and Able-Bodied Clubs. It doesn't anymore, trust me. But anyway, so I went along, and I went to a couple of them, and kind of, they weren't what I wanted for my future, but they gave me the confidence to. It's almost like if you know what you don't want, you can build what you want.
Know what you want.
And I was like, this is like special schools. So I didn't. So I went out and went pubbing and clubbing and went down the Electric Ballroom and down the Camden Palace and just had a great time. But I started getting involved with Phab again because they were trying to update, trying to modernise. They asked me, we haven't got any kind of trustees or anyone that's disabled. Would you want to work with us? And I said, yeah, that'd be great, with the goal of making them more modern and more up to date.
Yeah.
And that was quite a few years ago. And then the job came up, the CEO, and I've applied to be the CEO of quite a few disability charities. To no avail, because apparently I'm not CEO material. But I thought I'll apply for it. And it clicked because all of the board and charity is a very weird thing because it's a bit like working on like a program like Succession, in that you've got all these people that you have to answer to, and the board has a chair that's like a big control, and that's great and it's brilliant. But I'm not used to that. So I've come from doing whatever I like most of my career. If people piss me off, I just don't go away. But they wanted to modernise what Phab was, and my ideas they loved. They loved the fact that it, kind of to get a disabled person to lead was really important.
Yeah.
And because I was still not well, we had this project where we said, why don't we co-CEO? And I'm leading with a wonderful woman called Dawn Vickers, and her brother has got Downs. She's got lots of connections to disability that kind of mean that because we don't just work with disabled people, we work with disabled people, friends, family, carers, young carers. It made sense because I don't know what it's like to be the brother or the mother or of a disabled person. I only know what it's like to be me. And so we've got this great relationship where she can handle one bit and I handle the other. Also, she's worked in charity most of her career, so she's really good at the bits that I don't get. And like getting funding and talking to like groups and whatever. And I'm kind of Mr. Crazy Blue Sky thinker. Yeah, let's do this. And that's why this new consultancy has sort of started up. The first year we tried to do 50-50 jobs split and it didn't work. So now we're having projects that are ours. So Dawn's doing some stuff, I'm doing some stuff. And because part of our kind of ethos and core mission is education, I'm trying to educate. The plan is to get business and to pay so that we can then give free training to charities and disabled people themselves. Because one of the things that I always think is I spend a lot of time talking to non-disabled people about the social model and about reasonable adjustments. But I don't talk to many disabled people about it. And lots of, especially young disabled people, have never heard of the social model, or they hear about it and think it's about staircases and lifts and ramps and all this kind of stuff. And it's not. So the plan is to use the big checks from the clients to pay for sort of providing this ongoing service where, either we'll do it online or I'll come up to your school, your group, your whatever, and we'll have a chat about what it means to be disabled and what it means for you as a disabled person when you start realizing that being disabled isn't about what your body doesn't do right. It's about what society doesn't let you do because you don't do it like other people. And I mean, I remember the moment, because I've been doing television for years, when I had a moment where someone, basically people didn't like me very much in the disabled community. I was a bit, I wasn't considered very political. I was a bit, well, hey, and I did a couple of things that weren't considered right for the community. And I became a pariah. And I was at a Channel 4 event, and I'll never forget Simon Minty spat at me. We're mates now, but I had no idea what was going on. And this wonderful woman, Vicky Waddington, trapped me in a lift. She had a big power scooter, and she basically, I was in the lift, and she wheeled in, blocked the door, and said, "You don't know why we're all pissed off with you, do you?" And I was like, "No." I was leaving terrified, and she explained to me the social model and why community mattered and why the fact that you don't have to share the same impairment to be disabled, and you do share the same exclusion. And I went into that lift one person and came out another. And when people say, they have a religious revelation, that's what happened to me. I had a moment of revelation when I looked back on my life and went, oh, right, it all makes sense now. And things like when I was 7, my father died of a heart attack. And everyone said to me, that's the stress of having you, that was. And I grew up thinking I'd killed my dad because I was disabled. And after I came out, I was like, no, you shitty bastard grands and aunts and all the people that said it to me, you made me feel like that. My whole life I've carried this guilt that I might have killed my dad because having a disabled kid was so stressful, when reality was society made it difficult for him and for me and for mum and my brother. But more importantly, Heart attack killed my dad, not me. He should have eaten well and run and done more exercise and stopped drinking beer all the bloody while. But that's what it's like. We get told it's our fault that your parents can't go on the holiday they want, or my mum and dad had to move to get me to go to a school that would take me. So they moved from the house they loved to a bungalow because they must have guessed that at some point I'd lose the ability to walk entirely. Talk about jammy. But do you know what I mean? We don't appreciate the amount of guilt that gets laid on us as disabled kids. And it happened, even if you become disabled, if you break your back in a car accident or whatever, once you get over the trauma, one of the things that happens is you start feeling guilty because you're making other people's lives more difficult. And it's like, it's not your fault, it's society's fault. And the great thing is, you can't change you. There's loads of people who go, I'm trying to walk and I want to do this, and technology will make me see or whatever. And the truth is that you're never going to be like you were, or like, the normal idea of what normal is, even though that's complete bollocks. But you can change society. We can all make society fairer for everyone. Because that's the truth. I was watching David Baddiel's program about being Jewish last night, and he kept talking about, well, no one would take the mickey out of disabled people. And I was thinking, if you've been outside, the disability hate crime's through the roof. We're on the cover of all the newspapers going, well, it's all right for them with their free car and house and millions of pounds, and the idea is basically all minorities get it in the neck. Without being funny, earlier on tonight, I made a joke about Josh Widdicombe being ginger. You're ginger. Do you know what I mean? Like, even people with red hair are okay to take the piss out. This idea that we're all, we live in a society where everyone needs to learn about being fairer and nicer and kinder to each other. And, all this, woke. Woke is great. Because what woke means is you're not being a shithead, right? The PC bit of yours thing, PC is great because all you're doing is going, should I use that word? Should I say that thing? Should I be that person? And I think that's a grown-up way of being, because I grew up in a society where, comedians on telly would talk about Sambos and, use words that we would now go, what? And that was, so we've done that. We did that with that minority. We're still not there yet, but we started. What's wrong with doing it for everyone else? I don't know.
I completely, but I think my concern with the big push on language and the way we talk and what we say and what we can't say is then it creates an air of confusion because people don't know one thing's acceptable to say to one person, one thing is. So, for example, I'd have no problem if someone called me a disabled person, whereas some people do have a problem with that word. So it's that whole thing I always bang on about on here going...
But that comes from the fact that there are loads of younger disabled people or newly disabled people that don't like the word disabled because they think it's about them. And that's why I want to teach people that disabled has nothing to do with you. It's to do with the fact that you live in a society that stops you being as abled as you should be, as you could be. It's all about potential, right? And it's funny, I do lots of stuff with people from the neurodiverse community, especially now I know I'm one of them. And lots of those people go, oh, yeah, but I don't like disabled and I don't like the social model. And I'm like, but the problem is you are the epitome of why it matters. Because once society understands that you just think slightly differently and you will do things differently, but it's no difficult for anyone to get it right and just ask you how you want to be treated, then you're right. Then you are no longer disabled. And that's the point of the social model, is we can get rid of that word when we get to the point where people stop using the word non-disabled or able-bodied or normal, because it's all rubbish. But, I mean, with my training hat on, it is the correct term in the UK under the social model is disabled person, not person with disabilities. Because as I've said, the disability is not your condition or impairment or illness. It is actually the way you're treated because of being different, either physically, mentally, cognitively, whatever. And the reason why it matters is because if you start thinking that way, and I may be becoming a little bit evangelical on this because I know I do, but if you start thinking that way, we can build a better world. If you go, I'm disabled because my legs don't work or my eyes don't work or whatever. Again, we're back to that. You can't fix that. That's just you. So then you end up with what we call, it is part of the medical model, which says, basically you can't walk, so life is difficult. Whereas actually, there's always medical stuff. But I learned at school, like I said, that non-disabled people that aren't disabled, have just as many illnesses and bits falling off. And trust me, when you get to my age, I'm probably one of the fittest people that I know. And I've had 3 broken backs. So do you know what I mean? Because all of my mates are getting old. And, I'll never forget, we were at a party recently. And one of my mates from the old raving days said, has anyone got any heartburn tablets? I've got terrible heartburn. And all of a sudden, we were all passing heartburn tablets around. Yeah. And I thought, well, in the 90s, these tablets would have been different. That's all I'm saying. So do you know what I mean? It's age is, and an inclusive society for disabled people is inclusive for everyone. This is the big one is, you can be, I'm more understanding about racial differences and religious differences and sexuality. But if you build an inclusive society for disabled people, we all win. And the whole thing around COVID should have taught us that. We went into lockdown. Everyone suddenly had an experience of being disabled under the social model because they couldn't go out or do anything. Which is basically what our lives are like. You lightweights, you're all complaining about a few months not being able to do what you want. Try 50 odd years or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But what should have happened, but we learned we could run a society in a different way. We could work, we could live, we could get on. And we've come out of that with a slightly different way of working, which was so much better for many disabled people.
Completely agree.
Podcasts, a perfect example of what went in lockdown. Yeah. And now it means that disabled people like your good self that want to break into the media can prove their worth at their own pace, in their own way, and then they have so do you know what I mean? You had to be spotted gigging in a pub on the off chance if you were lucky. Now you can prove it. This is the point. That's what inclusion is. It's not about going, we need more ramps and lifts and, braille and, hearing loops. It's about changing the way you think that says things can be different. We don't have to have one road from A to B. We can have all different routes from where you start to where you end so that people can take the different routes they like. And then that way we all end up in a world where, if you're, my next door but one neighbour used to, he went away on holiday to Cornwall and went tombstoning. Now, someone young, great, but this guy is my age and should have known bloody better. So he jumps off a cliff and lands into a pool of water that is much, much shallower than he thought it was. So his legs explode. They just shatter, right? So he's now in plaster up to his groin and blah, blah, blah. And eventually he spends 4 years in a wheelchair and all he ever talks about is how difficult it is. He's now riding bikes and he's not tombstoning because his wife won't let him. But he's back to being, kind of fairly fit. It's still, he's still at winter. He knows when the cold's coming because his legs hurt and all this kind of stuff. But he's up and about. Yeah. And I said to him, but imagine it this way: if I lived in a world that worked for me as a full-time person who cannot walk, when you broke your legs, your life would be a piece of piss. Whereas all he moaned about was how he couldn't go to the pub and he couldn't go to the loo. Do you know what I mean? And that's the point. We're all going to get old. We get old. To be honest, when disabled people get old, it's not that much of a shock. Oh, I can't do that anymore. Oh, well. Do you know what I mean?
I'll move on.
For the majority of the non-disabled world, getting old's horrible. And I think our world will be better.
I think my concern, I completely agree in the physical sense of the medical model, completely agree that the more accessible the world is in general, the better it becomes for everyone. Because as I always say on here, people need to realize more quickly that you have a 99% chance of becoming like us. We have a 0% chance, most likely, of becoming you. So that's
even with robot legs or wheelchairs that climb upstairs or bionic eyes or cochlear implants, we're still not going to be quite. And also, there's something about being disabled. I think that there's more to it than there's an identity of it. We do have a shared experience of being excluded, of being belittled, of like I said about the guilt and all that. But even that, yes, we will get rid of it. I think one day. I think one day it will become normalized, as a lot of other things are becoming gradually. But I think that there'll still be, like, you know, there's still a, you know, if everyone didn't see color, you'd still have color. You know, if everyone didn't care what their sexuality was, you'd still have sexuality. It doesn't disappear. So that's really important to remember, that we would still be different, even if being different was great. And I think that's
my big